event got very, very long-winded, and he went on and on and on. And in the middle of his speech, somebody got up in the audience and started to walk out. And the speaker, deeply hurt, turned around to him and said, "Excuse me, sir, where are you going?" And the guy said, "I'm going to get a haircut." The speaker said, "Now you're going to get a haircut? You couldn't get a haircut before?" And the guy responded and said, "Sir, before you began to speak, I didn't need it. I don't want that to happen to me. I am going to try, if I can, to respond to this amazing sermon, which, by the way, if you got Steve Cohen to give his time voluntarily, he's a good friend of mine and he charges a fortune." But I was amazed by the results. But I want to tell you why I'm a lover of Limmud. I have now been involved in Jewish education for approximately 54 years. If I take my first involvement in Jewish education as a madrich in the Zionist youth movement, and until today, almost 55 years have passed. And in my dealing with Jewish education, I think that the major input into what I've done in Jewish education is my reading of Jewish history in a particular way. If I was to describe two dates, which I think are the most central dates in Jewish life, I would say they are, number one, Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, and the second would be the meeting of the Jew of the ghetto with modernity in the late 18th and 19th century. Throughout Jewish history, Jews have debated how to Jew. There are different customs of how to do things. But there has never been a distinction. There has never been lack of uniformity in understanding what it means to be a Jew. What is a Jew? And I think that from the earliest part of our history until emancipation, the one thing that we were uniform about was an understanding, A, that the Jews are a people. They were once upon a time slaves in Egypt. They came out of Egypt and walked through a desert. They came to a mountain they called Mount Sinai. At Mount Sinai, they met with this being called God. They signed a covenant with God. According to that covenant, He would be their God. They would be His people. He would look after us. He would give us rain in the right season. He would take us into our land, and we would keep His commandments. And Jews for 2,000 years, until 250 years ago, would go on and say, and you know what happened? God kept His side of the bargain. He took us into our land. He gave us rain in the right season. He looked after us. But we sinned. And because of our sins, we were scattered among the nations of the earth. And therefore, our role in life is to retain our sense of being a people, which is, by the way, why Jews lived in ghettos, not because the non-Jew put us into a ghetto, because we wanted to live with other members of our family, of our people. We will keep God's commandments, and we will hope and pray that one day God will forgive us. And if He forgives us, what will He do? He will send the Messiah who will return us to Israel. That understanding of what it meant to be a Jew lasted until 250 years ago, and for at least 2,000 years before that. There was no lack of uniformity on that. The meeting of the ghetto Jew with modernity, that second most important date, totally disrupted that sense of uniformity. To the extent, my friends, that I believe that uniformity is over in the Jewish world. We will never again be uniform. We didn't ask for the emancipation, we got the emancipation, it played its game on us, we adapted ourselves to it, but the bottom line of our adaptation to this was the destruction of uniformity within the Jewish people. And on the other hand, the Jews cannot survive as a people without unity. Therefore, the major educational challenge of our time is the question of how can you create unity without uniformity? How can you create a world in which you recognize diversity and yet you struggle to find a way of creating a commitment to a unified Jewish people? And when I look at my life as a Jewish educator, I love these computers, just when I'm glad to look at my notes, it went off. Anyway, forget about it, I forgot what I was going to say. As a Jewish educator, and I look at my life as a Jewish educator, I try to say, what is it that I've tried to do in Jewish education? It has been, how can I bring people to contribute to a world and to be part of a world in which the Jews are not uniform, but they are unified? Probably the biggest challenge still facing us. Despite my 54 years in Jewish education, the problem has not been solved. And it is still the amazing and essential challenge to Jewish life. And so if I look now at these 54 years in Jewish education and say to myself, what is it that I've tried to do with people? Say, number one, how do you create a sense of belonging to this thing called the Jewish people? How do you recognize, and it's not easy, we are living in a world in which the majority of the Jews in this world are convinced that Judaism is a religion. I hate to say it, but I can't get away without saying it. Judaism is not a religion. Judaism is the religious culture of a people. I have to tell you a story that I love telling. I remember the first time I flew from the United States of America back to Israel. I had to go back to Israel. Suddenly I was on a visit to the States. I came to Kennedy Airport. In those days, at Kennedy Airport, El Al had its own terminal. It was called the Orange Terminal. I have no idea why. It was painted green. It took me 3 hours to find it. But I eventually found this terminal, and I walk into this building, and it's a room about 3 times the size of this room. And in this room, there are 3 identical booths. The one booth was passport control, the second booth was customs control, and the third booth was Chabad control. They looked exactly the same. I had no trouble with passport control. I had no trouble with customs control. I came to Chabad control, and this little Chabadnik turns around to me and says to me, "Excuse me, sir, did you put on tefillin this morning?" In New York. You all know what tefillin are. It's like an antenna that you put on to make sure you get a good connection. I suddenly thought to myself, what would have happened if I would have said to him, "Thank you so much for asking me to put on tefillin. I would love to try it. I have never put on tefillin in my life. It looks like a wonderful religious experience. I'm so grateful to you for asking me. My name's O'Reilly and I'm a Catholic priest." How will this Chabadnik respond? "Don't touch, I was talking to you, had a good trip, goodbye." But if I would have said to him, "Listen, I don't believe in this nonsense, leave me alone, I'm an Israeli, get off my back," follow me all the way to Israel to put on those shoes. Now why? Not because it is a good religious act, but because I am obligated to put on tefillin only because I'm a member of this thing called the Jewish people. I don't know of many places in the Jewish world where I get that sense of Jewish peoplehood as I do at a Limmud event. It is absolutely phenomenal. If you talk to Johnny Ariel, he will tell you that Limmud is the fulfillment of the Jewish peoplehood dream. That is a very, very profound statement and an amazing achievement. But it goes much further than that just sense of belonging to a Jewish people. It deals head on with the question of, can we remain a people and be unified as a people with a lack of uniformity that exists within the people? What here in Great Britain you call the diversity. This lack of uniformity within the Jewish people. Now it's very interesting. I was warned, Avraham, you're in England now. Don't use the word pluralism. That's for the Americans. But I'm going to use the word pluralism. Because I want to tell you what pluralism is to me. Pluralism is the ability to live comfortably with different interpretations of a common memory. How do you live comfortably with different interpretations of a common memory? Well, first of all, in order to do that, you have to link people to the memory. And one of the great things I find about the emphasis on learning at Limmud is that it's precisely this learning which ties us to the memory, which imbues Jewish life with a linkage to memory. What is assimilation? Assimilation is living somebody else's memory. Being a pluralist is being able to live comfortably with different interpretations of your own memory. And memory is central to our being. But when Jews come to Limmud, and I was there almost at the beginning, and I've been there many times since, the emphasis on study is a link of Jews to their memory. The ability to allow them to interpret that memory in diverse ways is participation in the future of the Jewish people, because there can be no other way for the Jewish people other than a unity which recognizes diversity. And by the way, as we discussed this morning, Uri, these are two value statements. How do you create among people a respect for others to the extent that they live comfortably with their interpretation, and at the same time value to an extent of almost a supreme value the concept of unity, of being uniform, of being unified, not uniform? Well, I have to tell you, that's what Limmud does. That's what the study tells you Limmud does. Whether we know it or we knew it in advance or not, we sensed it. We felt it in our guts. Come Steve Cohen, and for free. Tells us that that is what you're doing. Well, isn't that amazing? Now what happens when you touch this strange thing called Jewish memory? I want to tell a story that I told this morning at lunch. Anybody was there? Too bad, you're going to hear it again. come from a long line of very famous physicists in my father's family. And the day that I was born, my late father knew that I was going to be the world's greatest physicist. No question in his mind. So when I eventually went to university to study, I went to study physics. And on the first day of school, I was sitting in the physics lab, looking out of the window, and I saw this very, very cute young lady walk into the history department. So I graduated in history instead of physics. She's now the grandmother of my 15 grandchildren. Oh. But now my father is waiting for me to put Einstein out of business. So I have to let him know. So I write my father a letter and I say to my father, Abba, I'm not going to study physics. I'm going to devote my life to the study of Jewish history at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. I get back a response from him. We didn't have emails. I get back a telex. And I can see from the size of the letters that my father is furious. But he wasn't mad at me. He forgot that I'm going to be supposed to be a physicist. He was mad at the Hebrew University. He said, what? The Hebrew University teaches Jewish history? Are they crazy? There is no such thing as Jewish history. Jews do not have history. Jews have memory. Raymond's looking around the room to see how many people remember the story from the last time I spoke. Correct? My father was 100% right. It's that memory that is so vital to our very existence. My father carried to extreme. My father was an atheist. A Jewish atheist. He always said, I'm an atheist, Baruch Hashem. But you know what it's like when your father says to you, I'm not sure there's a God. I really do not know if we were ever in Egypt. But the one thing I know for certain is that he took us out of there. Now you try to grow up normal with an answer like that. There's absolutely no way. But it is a central concept, and memory is important. This narrative, this memory of the Jewish people is vital for our unity, because if we can't link to that narrative, there will be no unity. But if we expect everybody to interpret that narrative in the same way, we will lose most of the Jewish people. So the unique chromosome of the Jewish people is this memory. And what lies there when you touch this memory? What are the things you can't avoid? You can't avoid God. By the way, whether he exists or not. He is a central character in the narrative of the Jewish people. For me, he's a central figure in my life because he's a character in the narrative of the Jewish people. We also, in our relationship with God, created a value out of it. We took upon it ourselves to be a witness to the fact that there is a God in this world. And as I said in South Africa, I'm very proud of that. You know why? Because when you say there is a God in this world, you know what you're saying to human beings? You're not God. The job's taken. You're only human. You can make mistakes. You can't control others. You can't rule the world. That is a value statement of unbelievable importance. And when you travel through this memory, you're going to meet something called the land of Israel. I'm not the only South African in this room. But you know what it's like growing up in South Africa, where the Jews pray for rain in October? For us, it's the wrong time of the year. In England, you can pray for rain the whole year. But in South Africa, who the heck wants rain in October? And Jews are praying for rain. When I went to my dad and I said, Abba, why are they praying for rain now? He says to me, because our rain doesn't fall in South Africa, our rain falls in the land of Israel. Again, an abnormal statement, but a wonderfully Jewish thing. Because that's a part of our memory. So the land of Israel becomes central to our lives. And if you're serious about being a part of a people, you will know that after modern nationalism, the chances of a people remaining a people without a land or a state in which they are sovereign are severely diminished. And therefore, in order to ensure the survival not of Israel but of the Jewish people, the state of Israel becomes essential. Have you been to a Limmud conference? Without calling themselves a Zionist organization, they're probably the most Zionist organization I know. Every second session has got something to do with Israel. I'll tell you even more than that. You know what I love about being at Limmud? Is the embarrassment that some people have about Israel. You know how important that is? I love it when people are embarrassed about something. I very often get embarrassed by Israel. Israel doesn't always do the right thing. I can't stand it when people ignore that fact. If you're embarrassed about it, it says it's got something to do with me. It's a part of my life. That's why criticism of Israel should not be an enemy of ours. It should be encouraged. By the way, criticism like a mother, not like a mother-in-law. But at Limmud that happens. The love and the criticism is with a sense of love. That's at Limmud. Believe me, I know what's going on in the delegitimization world. But traveling in this world of memory, you can't avoid coming to God, coming to Israel, coming to all the other values that make us who we are. The people who gave the concept of a Sabbath to the world. What an amazing concept. You reach it as a member of your Jewish people when you go for a walk through your memory. And there's another part that's become very central to my life. Our responsibility to the rest of the world. Tikkun Olam. I love the United States of Americans institutions that are always talking about Tikkun Olam with a horrible American accent. Tikkun Olam, Tikkun Olam. I was in the United States recently at the General Assembly of the Federations with a group of Jews from Bet Shemesh. And all the Americans were talking about Tikkun Olam, Tikkun Olam. And one of the Israelis came up to me and said to me, Avraham, how do you say Tikkun Olam in Hebrew? It's central to our being. Your chief rabbi greatest contribution, in my opinion, to date, has been his ability to provide the Jewish intellectual background to the concept of our responsibility to the rest of the world. It's quite amazing. I learned from him how Abram's first meeting with God, God talks to Abram about 3 commitments. Number 1, build the family, build the people. Get out there and have kids. Build people. Your second responsibility is go to the land. And how does God go on? V'nitbarchu bachem kol mishpachot ha'adamah. May all the nations of the earth be blessed by your presence. I have a big dream. You know, somebody else said that. Not me. I have a wild dream. 18 years' time, the Jewish people get the Nobel Prize for Tikkun Olam. There is no such Nobel Prize, but there will be. And if we do get it, it's partially because of the work done at Limmud in making a commitment to the rest of the world. As Jews, as a Jewish responsibility, so central. That too is in our memory. My friends, if I could live in 200 years' time and look back on Jewish history, and I would ask myself the question, what is it that British Jewry has contributed to the future of the Jewish people? I will come up with 3 definitely and maybe 4. The Balfour Declaration, Sir Isaiah Berlin, maybe Lord Jonathan Sacks, who will fulfill that role after he leaves the rabbinate of his God. And primarily, the contribution of Limmud to the Jewish people. Thank you for doing so.